back to what you were saying earlier. Why is it that you would want to go to New Zealand for what would you say it was a writer's getaway or something like that?
Like if like because I dream like if there was ever going to be a time where I wanted to make a living solely off writing and now the podcast or stand up,
Mhm.
and I wanted to take some time to go on a little retreat so I could work on writing, then I would want to go to New Zealand because
Mhm.
it's a place I've always wanted to go. It's where they filmed Lord of the Rings, so there's beautiful sceneries like mountains. Like I want to go hiking there. I want to see where they filmed all that. Which Lord of the Rings isn't the main reason. It's more the scenery because I haven't seen all the Lord of the Rings movies. But
So is it
and
mostly because of the whole Lord of the Rings thing right there? Do you feel like it's because
I just
of
said it
that
wasn't because I
particular?
hadn't seen all the movies.
Well, but you have seen a few of them though. And plus, I do know your like whole fascination with the whole mythical writings, novel genres, and sci-fi and all that stuff. And that's very heavily leaning into mythology and whatnot. So, do you feel like because of those writings by J.R.R. Tolkien and the fact that New Zealand is associated with those books because that's where they filmed the series, do you think that could be a little bit more of a layering as to why you'd want to go there? Or do you think it's more so
Maybe.
for other factors outside of
Also,
just that?
this one's a bit more embarrassing, but one of my favorite YouTubers lives there, and in a perfect world, I would love to be able to talk shop with him.
Oh, perfect. What's the name of this particular YouTuber that may or may not live in New Zealand that you may or may not visit in the near future?
Hello, future me. His videos on writing are what taught me most of what I know about story structure.
Oh, okay. What sort of stories does he usually write or
He does a
produce?
lot of mental illness, and he's still. This is one of the things. Thinking about him is one of the reasons I don't have a very optimistic view on traditional publishing because he published two books on writing and world building, and they're published because people listen to them. But he still has yet to publish his first novel. It has beta readers right now, and he's talking to literary agents. That's what he said in the last video, and it irks me because he has 2 million subscribers. If he self-published, that was like 100,000 people would probably buy the book immediately. And it sounds like a slow process for him to deal with traditional publishers.
Yeah, dang. 2 million subs and he still wants to go after a publishing company. I feel like people with such a large following, they should be able to get that stuff right off the bat, especially if he's a prominent presence, or is it
I
at
was
the very
wrong.
least?
I was wrong. It's 1 million. 1 million. But
Oh well, that's still a demographic nonetheless. In my opinion, even being able to have like 100,000 people know you as a public figure online or some sort of literary person online, that's an accomplishment in itself. And being able to have like 100,000 people, like 10 times 100,000 people, you know what I meant by that. A
yeah,
million people.
like the second his book is on Amazon, I'm buying it. He'll post passages of it on YouTube sometimes, and it's really touching because it's a science fiction book, but the focus is on a mother's loss of her child. Like it's how she processes grief, and I haven't read it, but he'll pull out scenes. Like there's this one he wanted to do on Show Not Tell, like this one video he did. It was a 40-minute video, and he was focusing on character emotion. And he does this page-long scene where he's describing the main character Miyumi. Basically, she's drunk and she goes into her dead daughter's room and spills wine in there. And as
Oh
he's
wow.
describing the scene, it's fucking heartbreaking because you can see that she's trying to hold in these emotions. She's trying to wipe away this wine stain because a wine stain is acceptable in any room but this one. And the scene ends with her bursting into tears because that was her daughter's room. It's not her. Like it was like it was really good. And it's like I can't imagine someone who writes like that still having issues publishing, especially with their presence.
So this is a dude with a million subscribers, and you just told me that beautiful scene that he wrote right there. Obviously, you have an outsider perspective for this, but why do you think it is that he would still even be having problems trying to get a literary agent, even though he has all of this fantastic presence online with the stuff that he writes, and he's able to convey these emotional scenes in these books? Why do you think it's still difficult for someone like him to be able to get a publishing or literary agent.
So he's very vague, and I don't know what he means when he says, I'm still talking with agents. So the part where he has agents is plural is kind of what throws me off. Because so what I guess would be maybe it's his decision on who he wants to represent him. That would make more sense to me considering his strong online presence. But also because picking a literary agent is a huge decision on an author's part. Because you can have a good agent who isn't right to represent your novel. So agents typically they pick books that they're familiar with. Like for example, I was reading through this one agent the other day. It seemed like I could have emailed her, but she specified that she only works with children's and pictures because those are the things she knows how to sell. And then you have some with more niches, like this one agent who does romance and like science fiction because they know those genres well and they know how to sell them. And what agents will ask themselves when they're reading something, and like assuming it's in their genre, is how can I sell this to a publishing house, and how can I sell the author to this publishing house? Because they're the ones talking to the publishers, and they're the ones saying, this is the right person to tell the story because of this. This story is compelling because of this. So, like one of the things I've had to consider recently, this question threw me off, which I was kind of disheartened being told it's a very basic question, which was, why are you the right person to tell this story? It was what one of the literary agents asked me or had in their query.
That feels weird for them to be asking a question like that because writers are the ones that make their own original stories, right?
No, it's a fair question, and here's why. Because no one person can know everything, and you run into a lot of issues when you have someone telling a story that they're not really fit. For example, I still
Okay.
have both my parents, and while I can sympathize and understand the kind of pain of not having parents, I would not be the right person to tell a story that's all about a kid in the world with no parents. If you're a literary agent and I told you I was writing a book on African American heritage, do you think you could sell that?
I don't think that I could sell that, and I know damn well that you probably wouldn't even be able to write that, and that's simply based on the grounds that you and I probably, as far as I'm aware, do not share that similar living experience that people of that demographic have.
Exactly. But if Chase said that he was writing a book on the African American experience, he would be the right person to write that story.
Yeah, wait, are we talking about like Chase,
Chase
the person that
Ali.
I know? Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Then yeah, yeah. Okay, I was about to say because I feel like I thought he was like halfway there, but not fully. I don't know. Anyways,
He's
point
half.
is,
I remember mentioning this idea to you a few months ago where what if we, for a mental health episode, we got certifications for mental health counselors. I can't remember
yeah.
exactly what it was I was looking at, but one of the things that inspired me is that that's what Tim, the YouTuber I was talking about, his name's Tim, that's what he does. He is a mental health counselor and he routinely helps people with mental health issues, which is why many of his writings are centered around mental health and grief and stuff because he's qualified to tell those kind of stories because he's seen the effects it has on people and he's well aware of most mental health issues and how to accurately portray them.
So at the end of the day, make sure that you talk about something, or at least writing a story that you can have some sort of connection to, and that's able to be easily conveyed to the audience that is out there. Because we all live different experiences in life, does that immediately bar us from being able to talk on certain issues when it comes to the writer's world? Like, for example, you mentioned earlier, you and I don't have any sort of standing ground to be able to talk about the personal lived experiences of African Americans in this country. But do you think that automatically bars us from being able to talk from our particular standpoints on the matter from an outsider's perspective, or should it just be left better to the people that actually live that experience on a day-to-day basis?
So I'd say it's very dependent on what it is you're writing. For example, in my book, I have a gay character, Rachel, and I have a bisexual character, Clara. I am not gay, nor am I bisexual, nor am I a woman. However, it's about drawing on experiences you do understand. And if you don't fully understand it, it's about talking to people who do. So I'm not gay, but my brother's gay. and I know people within the gay community who identify as gay, bisexual, transgender, and it's about asking for their opinions on maybe not how they would like to be represented, but what is the right way to represent them. So when I create these characters, they are not just gay or they are not just bisexual. They are people, and those are simply aspects of their personality. And the discussion gets a bit more difficult. Like in one of the books I want to write, it would involve a lot of gods from different cultures. And some of the issues with that is that sometimes writers will just kind of pick and choose what they want from separate cultures without respecting the cultural context. And what you get when you don't respect the context is that you can use some stuff that are actually pretty sacred to that kind of people. So, for example, I mix up Skinwalker and Wendigo. Neither are okay to use. But if I'm not mixing this up, Skinwalker is traditionally a Navajo term, and they don't talk about it with non-Navajo. It might be a metaphor for human greed. I don't know. I don't look into it because I don't want to use it because I'm aware that Skinwalker is a term specific to the Navajo people, and that if I were to use that term, it would be offensive to them. So
Yeah.
I would stay
And
away from stuff like that.
yeah, and let's also say just right now for covering our asses, he's saying that word right now as specifically an example purpose. This is not in any way, shape, or form us trying to make fun of the Navajo people. That was purely an educational standing right there. But to the point that you were making, people need to make sure that they're watching what they say in regards to the cultural contexts for the characters that they write on. Off of that, when you go about finding more research on those particular groups of people and talk with people that do live those certain lives, like gay, bisexual, African American, or even talking about gods and whatnot, has there been a common trope as to what people don't want you to say?
People don't want you to treat them like they're a joke. They want to be treated with respect. If it's something I don't intimately know, then I probably won't write about it. Mostly because the way I think about writing is I get inspiration when I talk to people or when I meet some new interesting concept. And I don't want to expand on that concept until I know more. So I have a notebook I'm always carrying around, I'm always scribbling in it. It's either here is the structure for the story or here's the plan I have, and here are questions I'll need answered. So, for example, I wanted to do research on Japanese gods for the story that I'm writing. And this is more in a context when Japan was more isolationist, more pre World War One, World War Two. But those gods still had a strong place. And I'm a bit behind. I'm not sure exactly where their place in Japanese society is today. But I know in World War II, with the Emperor Hito, he was considered divine because his lineage was considered to have been descended from like gods or have that bloodline. So that culture is important back then. And I'm still doing research. I have no reason to believe it would be offensive if I used Japanese mythology, but it's a process and learning more and seeing what's okay for me to use, what's personal to people, and what do I start to learn more about.
When do you think you'll be able to confidently say that you've picked up on the culture and you're able to accurately portray it in what you are writing?
I don't think I'll ever be able to 100% say I got this down. I'm confident in this because
Well, yeah.
even no matter who I talk to, I feel like there'll always be someone who points out I got a little thing wrong because I'm not perfect. I'm going to get a lot of things wrong. I mentioned this earlier. I have a gay character in my novel. Her name is Rachel. And one of the things in that novel that is a struggle is that only one person knows that she's gay. And part of the struggle that I try to portray is she loves her friends, but they don't know this aspect about her. And I wanted to kind of portray the struggle of when you're keeping a secret from a friend and you desperately want to tell them, but you're nervous about the potential fallout. I wanted to kind of capture that conflict. And I have the scene written where she's coming out to one of her friends, and she doesn't explicitly say she's gay, but I think when you say I'm coming out, it's kind of understood. And I might rewrite that scene, but even as is, if some people may read it, they may think, oh, this is, this is good, this is heartfelt. Other people may think that, oh, like this isn't done well at all, this isn't good representation. And it's a continuing process that I have to learn to improve on. A core aspect of being a writer is describing things that you yourself have never experienced. I have characters that have had broken bones, been shot, electrocuted, and generally been in a lot of bad situations. A lot of bad situations I myself have never been in. So a lot of it is guesswork. That is one of
And
the main
I
things.
hope to God that you never get yourself into those situations. That would not be a fun time to be testing out the healthcare insurance that you got, my man.
I am committed
It's,
to research. So this weekend I'm gonna go to the
hey,
I'm gonna go
hey,
I'm gonna go
hold
to the
on a
south
sec.
side of Chicago this weekend. That's how dedicated
No,
I am.
oh, no, 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 no. Nah, that's too much experience right there. You don't want the King Vaughn experience. That would be a bad one. So going back to the whole places stuff that we were talking about earlier and kind of like roping in what we just discussed a little bit here. In terms of garnering experience, do you think that because you want to be able to get more of a grasp on some of the cultures and aspects that you talk about in your writing, do you believe that's why it's a good idea to go on certain writers' retreats, like how you were mentioning earlier with New Zealand, and being able to go and understand more of that culture in that area while writing? Or do you believe that you could still get the same amount of leverage just by doing your own research from home?
I know nothing about the culture of New Zealand. I'd probably get a lot of inspiration there, but I would say travel is definitely a 100% the best way to go about getting those kinds of experiences because you'll never be able to fully understand a people until you go where they live. And I say that as someone who has lived in Spain and lived within a different cultural context. So I would say the biggest takeaway I had from Spain was more of an emphasis on collectivist versus individualist ideas. So in America, we're big on individual freedoms. But in Spain, it's more kind of a collectivist mindset where people will do stuff because it's common decency. And they will do things simply because it is the right thing to do, less because, and even if it inconveniences them.
So are you saying that Spanish people tend to have a more higher moral compass that they lead with as opposed to what you typically experience in American culture?
I'll just say it's more of a collectivist mindset where you think it more in terms of community versus more in terms of an individual. And granted, I was in Madrid, so that's also a city environment, which is one I have not been exposed to very much in the States. I've been to New York City a couple times, but visiting there, it's really hard to draw the same kind of similarities between like being a tourist in New York versus living in Madrid.
Also doesn't help that you go to school in the middle of the damn Midwest, my man. That doesn't really do you any favors in getting that city life.
Exactly. So there are things that I'll never fully understand. Like I hope I never understand living in New York City because the time I spent there, I don't want to live there. But it would be an important aspect to consider because good writers have the ability to create vastly different characters with different values, different ways of seeing the world, different ways of speaking. And every character you meet, they feel interesting, they feel new, and they feel like a person. And how good writers do that, I'll let you know when I find out.
Really saying it's got to be a while before you become a good writer. Do you not believe in yourself, young Nick Allen?
So, at the time of this recording, because I'm assuming you've been
We're
recording for the past however long,
coming
I
up on
have been
minute 26.
minute 26. Okay, I started recording 12 minutes ago, so you're better than me. Uh, but
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I have been writing for 3 years now. That is when I first started writing Finch, my first novel, and I have many years to go before I could ever feel as confident or that I could feel on par with writers that I admire. Because writing is something that many people dedicate their lives to. We got people like Neil Gaiman, Stephen King. There were people who had decades before they had real commercial success. I think was it with Stephen King? I read his book on writing, and in it he talks about how he would put his rejection letters on his wall starting from when he was 15, and how eventually that thing got so thick it changed from just like a pin to a nail that he had to nail into the wall until there were so many rejection letters it didn't fit on the nail. But what he noticed over time was that they got kind of a bit more kind, like keep trying, like you're close kind of tone. So writing is a kind of thing that you improve with a lot with time because you get into better habits and you get into better ideas of descriptions. Like, oh, I could describe someone as simply as, the bear, they have brown eyes, black hair, whatever. or I can begin to describe them in the abstract. Like the man was 6 feet tall and had the stature of a crane, or had a crane-like stature, which was that one I'm thinking from American Gods by Neil Gaiman. He has very vivid descriptions in there, and you could tell the time that he put into writing that book by his descriptions. The gods that the person interacts with, they're described as people. You see them as people, but you very much understand that they have different forms by how he describes them as people. One god having a crane like structure, one having certain scars on their bodies, or some even moving in certain kinds of ways that you know that their human form is not a natural form.
At the end of the day, this profession really comes down to trial and error and just getting through as many of the errors as possible in order to get to that gem that hopefully every writer is able to get to one day.
I've rewritten my book 5 times, and I still find myself making changes. Just the other day, I was thinking, what if I tried this new thing with dialogue? And I changed it. I liked it, and I even rewrote a few character interactions because I strive for my characters to feel more real, and I strive for them to be people that people who would read my books would enjoy. Like sometimes they're silly, or sometimes they're funny, and they're serious when they need to be.
Since you've been doing this for 3 years now, on top of the whole trial and error thing, what would you say is the most important thing for someone to do when they're starting off in this whole writer space? Doesn't matter
Don't
what
be afraid
genre
to
they're
suck.
writing, be afraid to
Don't be
suck.
afraid to suck. That is my answer. And anyone who writes will tell you the first draft just has to exist. The first draft is likely going to suck. It is purely there for you to get your ideas out on paper, and then from there you're going to pick out what it is you want to keep. There's this one structure I saw online that I really liked where it was like the first draft has to exist, second draft you make it functional, and then the third draft you make it effective.
So you've created your own three-step process in being able to
No,
go
no, no.
about
This is
reading.
online.
Oh, this is online.
I am no expert. I have not created any. The only creation is new is my book. All these ideas and concepts, I am constantly taking inspiration from other people and constantly asking for advice, seeing how can I get better.
Got it. So don't be afraid to suck and research the best ways to go about writing a novel that you may want to write yourself. Like you finding that three-step progression, being able to execute your own novel. Some people may not find that as helpful as different tactics they could do when writing their own stories. Would I be correct in that statement?
I haven't talked to a whole lot of other novelists. I've ran into a few, but very rarely do we get into how do you structure it because everyone has their own way of which they feel comfortable doing it. There's no one way to do it. But one thing everyone can agree on is that if you want to write a novel, first thing you have to do is start. You're going to be looking at a blank page before you're looking at a filled one.
I'll make sure to write that down on a sticky note and pin it to my desktop later on. That's my inspirational quote for the next few months here. All right, then. Well, I guess with that all being said, when are we going to New Zealand?
Dude, I
Where are
would
we gonna go,
love
man?
New
Come on.
Zealand. I would. I have no idea. New Zealand would be so cool.
Outside of New Zealand, where would be some of your other top places that you would want to go for a writer's retreat?
One of the settings I want to have in my book is I'm going to provide some history context here because I just think it's interesting and I just want to talk about it for a second. During World War II, when the United States kind of, I don't want to say, forgetting the word, not colonized, but when they were heavily militarized, when they militarized Japan, when we were kind of
You
like,
mean effectively took over during the wake of the aftermath that was December 7th, 1941?
yes, and I'm surprised you know the exact date. Someone's been watching Oppenheimer, but
No, it's
uh,
called my family members actually participated in World War II and were part of
oh,
the Pacific Theater. Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
that's how
anyway,
I know
so
that. Anyways,
in the wake of Japan's surrender, the United States took over a lot of control. And as a result, we had a lot of interplay between Japanese and American culture, which is kind of it's this sounds so weird saying it now, but it's kind of why we have anime and stuff like that because American comic books and American ideas began to bleed into Japan. So one of the ideas I want to explore is that the Japanese gods kind of died during World War II and that they're going to reform someday in a different kind of context. They now exist kind of differently in the minds of the people because the culture is so radically changed.
Yeah, that tends to happen when you do a number to their
But
civilian population. But that's
what
that's
I want to
interesting though. The entire culture believes what their gods died during the war and they're going to be
no, so
resurrected
it's not that they
when it.
believe it. It's so in the second story I'm writing, the gods physically exist and they can be killed. Because the goal of gods in the world that I'm writing is they protect our souls in the afterlife. That is their role. And while it is considered taboo, gods of death can be killed, and as a result, the souls that they protected are destroyed, or at least left without protection. And so while the atomic bombs wreaked havoc on Japan as a whole, I was thinking about, well, the afterlife and the effect. And it's not the atomic bombs that killed the gods, it's another plot thing that I'm not like fully prepared to talk about right now. But basically, in the wake, in this other world, the gods are killed shortly after the time of the atomic bombs. And one of the reasons I want to go to Japan is to explore the old architecture because I love the concept of abandoned places and to kind of be able to see Japanese architecture firsthand and then describe it as a place that's only being maintained by the few surviving members of like the Japanese pantheon would be something I would love to describe so long as no one comes up to me and is like, yeah, don't do that because it's offensive. But
Yeah, call back to earlier about appropriation and whatnot.
yeah, and I don't want to appropriate Japanese culture. I'm not aware of those gods actively being worshipped. I know that there are shrines that I'm pretty sure that there are shrines people. Like I said, I have a lot of research. Most of it's been historic and mythological. I have
Mhm.
not yet gone into like the modern day, and it doesn't help that I don't know many people who have lived in Japan. So
Fair
that's
enough.
one of the more reasons I'm also hesitant because I would love to actually meet people from the area so I can question them about their beliefs and culture. So the point is, I wanted to learn about the architecture because that would be a very prominent scene within that story where the characters walk through this place that was once thriving with a proud culture and now it's empty and barely surviving.
There's a lot of layers that could be added to that too, especially when you give it that historical context right there with what happened, what, damn
Yeah,
near
and then
a century
and then
ago.
it's like and then I'd have to build it in. Okay, well, here's the historical buildings, but here's the new context in which they exist in, the more kind of Americanized context we have today.
Okay, gotcha. So you'd word it in a way to be able to combine Western elements with that of the traditional Eastern ones and how that plays out in modern society.
Exactly. And I'll be honest, I did not think about that until like this
This
particular
very
recording.
second.
But no, because so in the world I'm creating, the gods can be reformed, but it takes a long time. And I was thinking that, oh, well, they would reform the same way as they were. And that's what the survivors are waiting for those gods to be as they were, but they'll never be the same. They'll never exist in the same context as they did before. So I'm thinking instead, and this is just me on the fly thinking, the gods reformed in this new kind of context within a couple decades, but we still have the people from the old pantheon hoping that one day their culture will return as it once was.
That's a very interesting take.
I'm gonna
Well,
write
I
that
mean,
down because
yeah,
I
you
did not think about it in that context.
I feel like stuff like that, like what you just described right there, just goes to show why fiction can matter so much to the minds of the people right there. But I think we should maybe save that talking point for a different episode in the future.
Yeah.
To sum it up, A, if you're going to travel, do it with the purpose of going on a writer's retreat so that you can get all the inspiration in the world.
I recommend travel is something everyone can do if they ever get the shot. I know it's expensive, I know it's difficult, but exposing yourself to different cultural contexts and learning about other people is so rewarding. Like even if I wasn't a writer, I just love learning about other people. I love hearing their lives, and I always feel like I take something away from it.
And make sure to get your passport as soon as possible too, because these wait times for passports, people, they are long. Like I just got mine in the mail the other day. It took 13 weeks for me to get it. And I'm still having to wait back on my other documents to get back in the mail that I sent in. So definitely if you feel like planning on doing a trip in the future, like now would be the time to get the supporting documents to be able to even do that trip in the future. But I digress. Coming back to everything. A, go on a trip, get yourself inspired, do what you can to be able to get the inspiration that you want for your books. B, do not be discouraged about the process of getting yourself a literary agent and potentially a publishing company because C, there's going to be a lot of trial and error that occurs along with accomplishing that, let alone even, formulating yourself as a writer. And if you're going to be talking about something in a certain context, it's best to have the knowledgeable background beforehand when you go into either writing, discussing, or formulating content surrounding those particular cultures and ideas.
Exactly. For any writers who want to write out there, sometimes those kind of texts that we need to understand something completely don't exist, like ancient history kind of stuff. It's forgiven for that. But if there's a culture that's actively alive and you think you can get away with writing about it without talking to anyone from that culture or reading up on it, don't write about that culture.
There you go. There's that
Yeah.
episode. I don't really know how to end
See
this
y'all
one
next
because we
time.
we kind of just like fell into it,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah, yeah. I didn't. Started recording like 10 minutes after you, so you're faster than me. But hopefully next time we'll know we're recording in advance, and you don't just get me mid conversation.
We hope you guys have a good rest of your day, evening, morning, night, whatever it is, whatever time you're listening to this. We hope you have a good one. All right. So take care, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Peace.